86. The proud have dug pits for me, which is not according to your law. All your commandments are faithful. They persecute me wrongfully. Help me. Notice here in verse 85, he informs Lord, not that God didn't know, but he's declaring this unto God. The proud have dug pits for me, which is not according to your law. The traps that were set for the psalmist were, in fact, directly against the law of God. Exodus chapter 21, verses 33 and 34, in the law of Moses, this gives us this principle that a man is responsible for damage when he digs a pit. But really, you wouldn't normally dig a pit to trap a person. Normally, the reason why an ancient Israelite would dig a pit was to trap a wild animal. And the idea here is that the psalmist is being hunted by his enemies as if he were a wild animal. That's what they do with beasts, not with men. And he's just relating to us how his enemies regard him. But nevertheless, the fact that he has these great and severe enemies, he can say this in verse 86, all your commandments are faithful. They persecute me wrongfully. You see, the psalmist found faithfulness and refuge in the commandments of God. These men who persecute me are the furthest thing from being faithful unto you, God, but your word is faithful. They persecute me wrongfully, but I find a refuge in you. Again, this is such a strong contrast from what he gets from his enemies. So in such times, the psalmist is praying the very logical prayer. I love this last line of verse 86. Help me. You know, that's a wonderful prayer, isn't it? There are times when you can just cry out to God and say, help me, Lord. Your prayer doesn't have to be eloquent. Your prayer doesn't have to be fancy. Your prayer doesn't have to have King James English or some poetic flair to it. Help me is a fine prayer to pray in times of trouble. Charles Spurgeon said this. He said, many a time have these words been groaned out by troubled saints, for they are such as suit 1,000 conditions of need, pain, distress, weakness, and sin. Help, Lord, will be a fitting prayer for youth and for age, for labor and suffering, for life and death. No other help is sufficient, but God's help is all sufficient, and we cast ourselves upon it without fear.